Okay, so now we've finished our brief tour of Kyobashi, and here we are with the new Kyobashi behind me and the old, the castle in front, and I'd like to tell you a few ghost stories. But first, some promotion. I've written 2 horror novels. This one is 29 Argyle Drive. It's set in Christchurch. It's poltergeists, haunted houses, etc. The whole 9 yards. It's a real occult horror story. And this one is Escarpment, is also a ghost story about ghosts on the battlefield of Okinawa. Neither of those stories is set in Osaka. One is in New Zealand, but the horror stories, the actual stories that are in those books were inspired by real, I believe, real anecdotes I heard from Japanese friends of mine, acquaintances of mine who have a sixth sense. And a lot of these stories were set in this Kyobashi area because it is very, very haunted. And I'm going to tell you a few of those stories that were told to me. I know 2 Japanese women personally who have a sixth sense. We'll call one Makiko. She's in her mid-30s. She was born and raised in Kyobashi, and she actually works here still. And the other one is Yuriko. She's retired and she lives in this area. Both of them have a sixth sense, second sight. Plus another friend of mine, a Japanese woman, also knows 2 people who also have a sixth sense. So I have a lot of sources for the stories I'm about to tell. And Yuriko did mention to me one time that there is a difference, there seems to be a difference between a ghost and a spirit. Fundamental different. Ghosts are there like a movie, like a DVD that is stuck in a groove, playing the same scene all over again and again and again, like a psychic imprint on the landscape. It has no real existence. A spirit on the other hand exists in the place that it haunts, and it can communicate with the living and it can harm the living. She told me 2 stories. She lives in a condominium that faces Osaka Park over there, I think. She woke up in the middle of the night to see a samurai sitting on top of a horse at the end of her bed. That, I guess, was a ghost because it didn't do anything to her. Another time she was staying at a hotel, a business hotel in the Kyobashi area with 3 friends. It was a class reunion from high school, and they were staying at the hotel and they were enjoying themselves in the evening, and then suddenly there was a knock on the hotel door. One of the friends went to the door and looked through the peephole, but there was nobody there. So they didn't think anything about it. Then a few minutes later, there was another knock, and the same friend went again, and there was still nobody there. So they thought it was like maybe a little kid being mischievous or something. But Yuriko was feeling the presence of things. She attracts spirits. And so the 3rd time there was a knock on the door, she went to the door, and while she was at the door, one of her friends called down to the front desk to complain about this mysterious knocking. And of course there was nobody there, but I think it was a handle. The door handle started to slowly go down. This spirit, she attracts spirits. The spirit wanted to come in, and she resisted it very, very strongly. And then the ghost or the spirit, wherever it was, disappeared. But the front desk came up. 3 people from the front desk came up and said, really, I'm sorry, there was nobody there, because the monitors showed that the corridor, the hallway was completely empty. But you know, if you're feeling disturbed, we'll give you another room. So they were upgraded to another room where they spent the rest of the night undisturbed. And it seemed that that kind of thing had happened very often with that particular room. Now Ken, I don't know him personally, but I heard this anecdote from somebody who does know him. He had the sixth sense. When he was a university student, he had a night job at another hotel in the Kyobashi area, and his duties included periodically checking each floor. And so he had to go up the elevator every night and check that everything was quiet on every floor. On one particular floor he dreaded going to, because every time the elevator stopped and the doors opened, he stepped out of the elevator into a battle scene of samurai shouting and screaming and fighting and slashing at each other all down the corridor. So he had to kind of dip his way down every time. It was the same scene. Again, I guess that was a ghost, not a spirit, not like the thing that was trying to get into Yuriko's room, but just the imprint, psychic imprint. The next story I heard straight from the horse's mouth. I was actually talking to a new employee at a company in this area, and a few years ago, the top floor, or until a few years ago, the top floor of the company's office building was used as a dormitory for the new employees. But then one year the new employees boycotted it. They called the managers in and they said, we're not staying here anymore, we want to move. And they were asked why, and they said, because every night we are disturbed by samurai on horses and on foot racing through the dormitory from one end to the other. So they insisted that this happened every night and that they wanted to move. So eventually the company moved them out to a new dormitory, and the top floor of that building currently is used for meetings and conferences. Before we went through a bit through the entertainment district, and I heard another story from one of these friends who knows Ken and this other woman who has a sixth sense. Her name, we'll call her Hiroko. So my friend and Hiroko were having dinner in Kyobashi, in the old part of Kyobashi over there, and this friend of mine had booked a table at an Italian restaurant. It was a basement restaurant. They met at Kyobashi Station, which we saw. They went down into the basement restaurant and they sat down, and they were looking at the menus, and then suddenly Hiroko, she turned pale, she started to tremble, and she started to sweat, and she just looked very unwell. So my friend said, Hiroko, are you okay? And she said, no, I'm not okay, we have to get out of here because I see terrible things and I feel terrible things. So they had to left. They left. My final stories come from Makiko. I said that she was born in Kyobashi, and she works in an office building in Kyobashi, and periodically, or almost every day, because she has the sixth sense, she sees figures hanging around the elevator hall of her building. They are male, and they are wearing, not samurai this time, but they're wearing workers' uniforms, and they are spirits or ghosts from of men who died in the bombing raids, and obviously her building was built on the site of some kind of armament factory. She sees them all the time, but she never makes eye contact. She says it's dangerous to make eye contact with a spirit because they want sympathy, and so you should just ignore them if you ever have unfortunate enough to meet one in the elevator hallway. But she passes them by every day. She went to elementary school and high school in schools in this area, and she told me that when she was young, especially in elementary school, there was like an unwritten law, an unwritten rule that when the day's classes were finished, go home, get off the school property as quickly as possible, go straight home, don't hang around this area because strange things can happen after dark. And this rule applied to the teachers also, when usually teachers hang around the school until late at night, but in Kyobashi they don't. They get out of there as quickly as possible. She told me when she was younger, her second sight, her sixth sense was very strong. And one story, well, two stories she told me. The first one was at gym class, PT class. She was in the gymnasium with her class and another class, and then she suddenly saw a spirit that had attached itself to the ankle of a boy in another class, and she said it was the color, a leaden color, like the color of a shark, and it was fuzzy and quite elongated, and that spirit just kept hold of the boy's ankle. And then another time, she and her friend, this was in high school, she and her friend had finished, it was again in the gymnasium, they'd finished for the day, they were going home, and they got to the school gate, and it was kind of getting, like now, it's getting a bit dark and rainy maybe, and the friend said, I forgot something in the gym, I'm going to go back and get it. And Makiko said, well, leave it for tomorrow. You don't have to get it. And she says, no, it's okay. It's okay because I have this, which is a Japanese omomori, I guess a Buddhist good luck charm. And so she said, I'll only be a minute. So she ran back into the gym and she picked up her bag, but as she was coming out of the gym, she heard a woman's voice, a clear woman's voice in her ear, saying in Japanese, "Sonna wa imi ga nai yo," which in English said, that kind of thing, meaning this, is meaningless. That kind of thing is meaningless, was the voice in her ear. Okay. So I feel we should get out of Kyobashi. I'm beginning to make myself nervous.